Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My son and his ex split up a few years back when their daughter was still a toddler. They've both moved on since then. She's with someone new now and they just had a baby together. My husband and I have always tried to keep things civil and include everyone in family activities. We're not the type to make things complicated just because relationships changed. Our granddaughter is what matters most. A couple months ago, we all started talking about going to this holiday event at the local petting zoo. It was one of those special nighttime things they do during Christmas season. They had lights everywhere, little sleighs pulled by miniature horses, people singing carols, and a bunch of other entertainment. Plus, they were serving dinner chuck wagon style. It sounded perfect for our granddaughter. My husband told everyone he'd cover the tickets. A few days before the event, he found VIP passes on sale for a good price, so he grabbed them for all of us. Kids got in free anyway, which was nice. We figured we'd all drive separately since everyone lives in different parts of town, so my husband made arrangements to have everyone's tickets ready at the gate when they arrived. The original plan was simple. We'd all go to the event together, then our granddaughter would spend the night at her dad's place and stay with me during the day until Christmas. Nothing complicated. Then 2 hours before we're supposed to leave, my phone rings. My son's ex is on the other end telling me she talked things over with her boyfriend's mother. His mom decided she wanted the event to be just family. She says we can have our granddaughter from the 26th to the 1st instead. But she wasn't done. She kept going, telling me how they discussed Christmas gifts too. They didn't want our granddaughter getting tons of toys. Only clothes and jewelry would be acceptable. If we absolutely had to get her a toy, it could only be stuff from that expensive American Girl brand. Here's the thing. Our granddaughter had been telling us for weeks what she wanted. Ice skates because she wanted to learn. A robot dinosaur because she thought they were cool. Art supplies because she loves drawing. Not once did she mention anything about American Girl dolls to any of us. My husband had already paid for those tickets. We'd made plans, everyone had cleared their schedules. And now, with barely any notice, everything was getting flipped upside down because her boyfriend's mother suddenly decided we weren't family enough to attend. I told her I needed a minute and would call her back. I immediately talked to my husband and our son. We were all thinking the same thing. If they wanted it to be just their family, fine. But we weren't going to sit home after spending money and making plans. The three of us decided we'd still go to the event. When we got there early, I walked up to the ticket booth and talked to the girl working there. I asked her if she could give our extra tickets to the next family with kids who showed up without passes. She smiled and said she'd be happy to do that. It felt good knowing some family would get a nice surprise instead of those tickets going to waste. We went in and started enjoying the event. The lights were beautiful. Our granddaughter was having a blast, petting the animals and riding in the little sleighs. My husband bought her hot chocolate and we were walking around looking at all the decorations when my phone started buzzing. It was my son's ex. She was losing it. She demanded to know where the tickets were. The girl at the gate had told her there was nothing waiting for them. I explained that I gave them away. She exploded asking what I meant and saying I was supposed to give them to her group. They'd driven all the way there. I reminded her that she'd told me she wanted to spend the event with just her family. I said I was happy to bring our granddaughter in since she's my family, but I figured she'd want to get her own tickets for her family group. The line went dead. A few minutes later I saw them at the gate. She was arguing with a ticket person, probably about prices. I found out later they ended up paying twice what my husband had originally spent because they had to get last-minute general admission passes. The VIP tickets my husband bought included all the little rides and the dinner. General admission meant paying extra for everything. $20 per person just for the food. Our granddaughter stayed with us the whole time. We took her on every ride, let her pet every animal, and made sure she had the best night possible. Meanwhile, her mom's group was nickel and diming their way through the event. When dinner time came around, we were already seated at the VIP section with our food. I saw them standing in line and then suddenly they were leaving. They didn't want to shell out another 20 bucks each for the meal. When they were heading out, my son's ex came walking over to where we were sitting. She called me a Grinch and said she was trying to do something nice for her boyfriend's mother, and I completely ruined it. She went on about how this was supposed to be her Christmas gift to his mom. I told her that maybe she should have planned her own outing instead of trying to hijack ours at the last second. She fired back saying I was keeping our granddaughter from her family. I responded by saying she was the one who said she wanted it to be just family and we were just respecting her wishes. She grabbed her boyfriend's arm and they left. Our granddaughter looked confused, but we distracted her with dessert and more activities. The rest of the evening was perfect. We sang carols, watched the little show they put on, and took a million pictures. Our granddaughter fell asleep in the car on the way home, completely exhausted and happy. Later that night, I got a text message calling me petty and spiteful. Then another one saying I was keeping their daughter from her mother during the holidays. Then one from her boyfriend's mother saying I was disrespectful. I didn't respond to any of them. My husband and son both backed me up completely. We'd made plans, spent money, and were told at the last possible moment that we weren't wanted there. The fact that they expected us to just hand over our tickets so they could enjoy what we'd paid for is beyond entitled. Our granddaughter stayed with us through Christmas like we originally planned. We got her the ice skates, the robot dinosaur, and a big art set. She loved every single thing. Not an American Girl doll in sight. I should have known something was off when my wife called me that morning sounding stressed. She asked if I could do her a huge favor and take her friend's son to the soccer game with our son. I said sure and asked which friend she meant. She told me it was the one who usually carpooled with her every week. I recognized who she was talking about and asked what time I needed to pick him up. She said around 3 and promised to text me the address. She thanked me and said I was a lifesaver. I didn't think much of it at the time. My wife had this whole carpool system worked out with a few other soccer moms. And since she was out of town visiting her sister, it made sense she'd need someone to cover for her. I'd driven the kid before with no issues. He was a nice kid, quiet, polite, always said please and thank you. His mom would usually pick him up from our house after practice. We'd chat for a few minutes, and that would be that. The game that afternoon was typical. Hot, loud, lots of parents yelling encouragement from the sidelines. Our team won by 2 goals, and both our boys played well. I was packing up our stuff when I noticed the kid's grandmother standing near the bleachers, talking to a man I recognized. It was her daughter's ex-husband. I'd met him a few times back when they were still married. My wife had told me plenty of stories about their messy divorce and how he'd been a terrible husband. But I'd never personally had any problems with him. He'd always been friendly enough to me on the few occasions we'd crossed paths. I walked over to where they were standing and asked if he was picking up the boy today. The man turned and smiled, saying, yeah, he figured he'd come watch the end of the game since he hadn't seen him play in a while. The grandmother nodded and didn't seem bothered at all. She asked if I could let her daughter know her phone had died so she wouldn't worry when she couldn't reach her. I said sure, no problem. I grabbed my son and we headed home. The whole drive back I was thinking about what to make for dinner and whether I needed to stop at the store. It wasn't until we got home and I checked my phone that I saw 5 missed calls from my wife. I called her back immediately. She answered, demanding to know where he was and where the boy was. I asked what she meant and told her his dad had picked him up at the game. There was a long pause. She asked me if I understood what I'd just done, her voice rising. I explained that his dad was there with his grandmother and they said he was taking him home. I mentioned the grandmother's phone was dead and she'd asked me to tell his mom. She asked if I was serious right now and whether I had any idea what I'd just done. I asked what she was talking about. She told me he was an abuser and that I'd just left that child with an abuser. She asked how I could be so irresponsible. I felt my stomach drop. I asked her to wait and said she'd never told me that. I reminded her she'd said they had a bad divorce but never mentioned anything about abuse. She said everyone knew this and asked how I couldn't know. She told me I could have just put that kid in danger and might have helped him get kidnapped. I asked her to hold on and pointed out that his own grandmother was standing right there and didn't object at all. I asked if it was that serious. Wouldn't she have said something? She said that wasn't the point, and that I should have called her first. She insisted I should have checked and done something other than just hand him over. I sat down on the couch, trying to process what she was saying. I told her I understood she was upset, but I honestly didn't know. I explained that based on everything she'd told me, I thought it was just relationship drama between them. I said she'd never mentioned abuse toward the kids. I pointed out again that his grandmother was right there, lived with them, and saw the kid every day. I reasoned that if she thought it was unsafe, she would have stopped it. She said I was making excuses and reminded me I was supposed to be responsible for him. She said his mother trusted us with her child, and I'd just given him away to the first person who showed up. I told her that wasn't fair and that it wasn't some random stranger but his father. I emphasized his grandmother was there supervising. I asked what I was supposed to do, refused to let his own family take him. She said yes, that was exactly what I should have done. She insisted I should have brought him back to our house like we always did and waited for his mother to pick him up. I said okay, but pointed out they had custody arrangements. I mentioned I'd seen him pick up the kids before on his scheduled days. I asked if there was a restraining order or something legal preventing him from seeing the kid. Wouldn't someone have mentioned that to me? She said it was unbelievable and that she couldn't even talk to me right now. She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, completely bewildered. My son came downstairs looking for a snack. He asked if everything was okay and said, I looked worried. I told him, yeah, everything was fine, just some confusion about who was picking up his teammate. I decided to text the kid's mother directly. I wrote that I wanted to check in and make sure everything was okay. I explained her ex showed up at the game and said he was taking her son home. I mentioned her mom asked me to let her know her phone died. I said I hoped I didn't mess anything up. I waited, anxious, expecting an angry response. Instead, about 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. She texted back saying no worries at all and that everything was completely fine. She explained he just stopped by to say hi and watch the end of the game. She said her son went home with her mom like usual. She thanked me for checking though. I stared at the message for a long moment before forwarding it to my wife. About an hour later, she called back. She said she'd seen the message. I told her so everything was fine just like I thought. She said she was worried and asked if I could blame her for being concerned about a child's safety. I said no, but told her she couldn't blame me for not knowing details she never shared with me. I suggested that next time maybe she could give me a heads up if there was something I needed to know about who could and couldn't pick up the kids we were responsible for. She sighed and admitted I was right. She said she should have been clearer and apologized for jumping down my throat. I told her apology accepted but emphasized that communication goes both ways. She agreed and said she'd do better. We hung up and I finally felt like I could breathe again. The whole thing had been blown completely out of proportion over a misunderstanding. But at least now I knew to ask more questions next time I was put in charge of someone else's kid. My daughter turned 2 last month, and every trip to the store feels like orchestrating a military operation. Snacks? Check. Spare diaper? Check. Patience for the inevitable meltdown in aisle 5? Double check. On that day, the store was busy but not packed, and my little one had been an angel through the whole shopping trip. She even helped me pick out apples, pointing at the shiniest red ones with those chubby fingers. By the time we got to the checkout, I was feeling pretty good about myself. The parking lot was sweltering. August in Arizona doesn't mess around, and the heat coming off the pavement made everything shimmer like a mirage. I'd parked under one of the few shaded spots, strapped my daughter into her car seat, and started loading groceries into the trunk. She was babbling away back there, talking to her stuffed elephant about the cookies we'd bought. I had the trunk open and was lifting a heavy bag when I heard my driver's side door open. My first thought was that I'd forgotten to lock it. My second thought was confusion because I definitely hadn't left it unlocked. By the time I looked up, this woman was already sliding into my driver's seat. She was maybe in her 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, wearing expensive yoga pants, and a tank top that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. And she was getting into my car, into my running car, with my daughter in the back seat. I shouted at her, demanding to know what she was doing and ordering her to get out of my car. She didn't even look at me. Her hand went straight for the gear shift. She told me flatly that she needed this more than I did because she was late for an appointment. The audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. This woman was trying to steal my car, with my child inside. I dropped the grocery bag and moved fast. The milk probably exploded when it hit the ground, but I didn't care. My concealed carry permit isn't something I advertise, but I've had my weapon on me every day since my ex-boyfriend started making threats after our custody battle last year. I'd taken the classes, done the training, hoped I'd never need it. I needed it now. I drew my pistol and pointed it directly at her through the open door. I told her to get out of the car immediately and made it clear that my daughter was in the back seat. She froze, her hand still on the gear shift. For a second I thought she might try to drive off anyway, and my heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. But then she looked back, saw my daughter sitting there wide-eyed, and something in her face changed. She argued that I couldn't do this to her, and mentioned her appointment before asking if I knew who she was. I told her I didn't care if she was the governor, and ordered her to get out of my car and lie face down on the ground. She started to argue, but I wasn't having it. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. I repeated my command for her to lie face down on the pavement with her hands visible. A man with a shopping cart full of groceries had stopped about 20 feet away, phone already in his hand. I called out to him without taking my eyes off the woman. I asked him to call 911 and report an attempted carjacking in progress at the grocery store on Baseline. He nodded and started talking urgently into his phone. The woman was still in my driver's seat looking at me like I was the crazy one. She said this was ridiculous and that she just needed to borrow my car for an hour, claiming I was overreacting. I told her my 2-year-old daughter was in that car and gave her one final warning to get on the ground or I would defend my child. That finally got through to her. She climbed out slowly. The pavement had been baking in the sun all day, and I watched her flinch when she got down on her stomach. The heat had to be brutal against her skin, but I felt zero sympathy. She complained loudly that this was assault and threatened to sue me, demanding to know if I realized how much her outfit cost, and insisting I would pay for this. I reminded her that she tried to steal my car with my baby inside and ordered her to stay down. More people had gathered now, phones out, watching. My daughter started crying in the back seat, scared by all the commotion and her mother's raised voice. Every instinct told me to go to her, but I couldn't. Not yet. The woman kept complaining about the hot pavement, about her ruined clothes, about how I was going to regret this. She twisted her head to look at the growing crowd and called out to someone to help her, claiming that I was a psycho who'd pulled a gun on her for no reason. The man who'd called the police spoke up and told her that he'd seen the whole thing, that she'd gotten into my car while I was loading groceries, and that was carjacking. She protested that she was just going to borrow it. A woman in scrubs standing nearby shook her head and asked if she was insane for trying to take a car with someone's kid in the back seat. The police arrived 6 minutes later, though it felt like an hour. 2 squad cars pulled up fast and the officers approached with their hands on their weapons. I immediately announced I was armed and carefully set my pistol on the ground, then stepped back with my hands visible. The female officer went straight to check on my daughter while her partner dealt with the woman on the ground. My little one was sobbing, reaching for me through the car window. The officer asked me to explain what had happened. I explained everything while the other officer hauled the woman to her feet. She immediately started yelling about being the victim, about how I'd assaulted her, about her lawyer. The officer looked unimpressed. He told her that they had multiple witnesses who saw her enter my vehicle without permission and said she was under arrest for attempted motor vehicle theft and attempted kidnapping. She went pale at the word kidnapping. She protested that she hadn't kidnapped anyone and that she just needed a car. The officer explained that there was a child in the vehicle and that made it attempted kidnapping. They cuffed her and put her in the back of the squad car while she screamed about discrimination and lawsuits. I finally got to hold my daughter, who buried her face in my shoulder and held on tight. The police took my statement, verified my concealed carry permit, collected phone videos from the witnesses. The officer said I'd done everything right, that I'd shown appropriate restraint. They gave me a case number and said the district attorney would be in touch. 3 weeks later, I got a call. She'd been charged with attempted motor vehicle theft, attempted kidnapping, and endangering a minor. Her lawyer tried to get a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't having it. With all the witness testimony and video evidence, she ended up taking a deal for 18 months in county jail plus probation. I still think about that day every time I load groceries. My daughter doesn't remember it, thank God. The HOA board where I live have been running things like their own personal kingdom for over a decade, and anyone who questioned them got crushed. I first noticed something was wrong about 6 months after moving in. My neighbor, 2 doors down, a retired Marine whose son had died serving overseas, had planted a small memorial garden in his front yard. Nothing fancy, just some perennials, a small flag, and a commemorative stone. He'd even gotten written approval from the previous board president years earlier. Then the current board decided they didn't like him because he'd complained about them raising our dues without proper notice. The increase was from $275 to $400 per month with no explanation or budget breakdown. At the next meeting, one of the board members called his memorial dead plants and demanded he remove it. I watched this elderly veteran's hands shake as he tried to explain what that garden meant to him. They didn't care. They wanted him punished for speaking up. That's when I knew something had to change. I started talking to other homeowners and quickly learned everyone had stories. The board was issuing contracts to vendors without competitive bidding, probably getting kickbacks. One landscaping contract went to a company owned by the treasurer's brother-in-law for $12,000 when other quotes came in at $7,000. They held secret meetings where they made decisions without telling anyone. They selectively enforced rules based on whether they liked you or not. If you challenged them, your life became miserable. One homeowner got fined $300 for parking his work truck in his own driveway overnight, even though half the neighborhood did the same thing without any issues. The difference was he'd ask questions about the budget at a meeting. The worst part was how they manipulated elections. They'd announce vote counts that didn't match reality, install their friends into vacant board positions without homeowner approval, and lie about who won elections. Last year, a homeowner ran against one of the board members and collected proxy votes from 32 families who couldn't attend the meeting. The board announced he'd lost by 15 votes. When he demanded a recount, they claimed the ballots had already been destroyed per policy, except our policy said ballots had to be kept for 90 days. They'd been doing it for years, and nobody had the energy or organization to stop them. So I decided to organize people. I created a private group for concerned homeowners and started documenting everything. Every questionable decision, every rule violation, every instance of retaliation. Within 2 months, I had over 50 families ready to fight back. The board president was a woman who'd held power for 8 years. Let's call her Karen because that's exactly the energy she brought to every interaction. Karen didn't just enjoy her authority, she weaponized it. Cross her, and suddenly you'd get violation notices for things that had been fined for years. Your architectural requests would get denied for nonsensical reasons. She'd even call the police on homeowners during disputes, claiming they were threatening her when all they did was disagree during meetings. One board member sent an email saying Karen was making life hell for a homeowner who'd spoken out against her. The email also mentioned that Karen had personally driven by this homeowner's house multiple times per day to look for violations. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They thought they were untouchable. We spent months preparing for the annual election. We recruited 3 candidates who actually cared about transparency and following the rules. We organized campaign efforts, created information packets showing all the board's misconduct, and made sure every homeowner knew what was happening. We even hired our own attorney to observe the election and ensure it was conducted properly. The board tried everything to stop us. They scheduled the meeting at an inconvenient time on a Thursday at 2:30 p.m. when most people were at work. They limited proxy votes, claiming there was a new rule that proxies had to be notarized. No such rule existed in our governing documents. They even tried to change election procedures 2 weeks before the vote, saying candidates needed to submit applications 30 days in advance. Our attorney shut that down immediately since it violated our bylaws. We showed up anyway. Over 100 homeowners packed that meeting, most of them carrying our documentation of board misconduct. Some people had taken the afternoon off work just to be there. When Karen tried to control the meeting like she always did, people shouted her down. She tried to rush through the vote without discussion, but our attorney stood up and told her she was violating proper procedure. When she tried to manipulate the vote count, we demanded an independent counter verify every ballot. She lost. Badly. Like not even close. The final count was 97 votes for our coalition candidates and only 23 for Karen and her allies. The homeowners elected 3 of our coalition candidates, flipping the entire board majority in one night. Another board member saw which way the wind was blowing and resigned before the vote even finished. He actually walked out during the ballot counting and never came back. That left one holdout from the old guard, and we voted to strip him of any officer position. He couldn't be president, vice president, treasurer, or secretary. He was just a board member with zero power. Karen's face during that meeting was something I'll never forget. 8 years of unchallenged authority evaporated in 2 hours. She tried to give some speech about how ungrateful everyone was after all her service to the community. People just stared at her in silence until she stopped talking and left. But the management company was even worse. They'd been enabling the board's misconduct for years, looking the other way while Karen and her allies broke every rule. Once we took control, we started investigating their contracts and communications. We discovered they'd been charging us $16,000 per year for services that similar neighborhoods paid $9,000 for. We also found emails where they discussed delaying maintenance requests from homeowners who complained about the board. Within a week, we had evidence of policy violations, selective enforcement, and possible financial irregularities. They resigned before we could fire them. They just submitted a letter saying they were moving in a different direction and bailed. Everyone knew what it really meant. They were running before we could expose everything they'd done. We won, they lost. The neighborhood could finally function properly, but Karen and her people couldn't let it go. Last week I submitted a simple landscaping request for my backyard. Nothing major, just some plants and a small patio area that would cost about $3,000. It's the kind of thing that doesn't even require formal approval under our governing documents. Backyard modifications that don't change the property line or affect drainage are explicitly exempt from review. It's literally none of their business. The outgoing management company, in their final week, plastered my request on the public meeting agenda. Full name, full address, description of the project, with a note inviting public comment. This had never been done before for a backyard project. In 4 years of meeting minutes, not a single backyard modification had ever appeared on a public agenda. They were trying to humiliate me, to punish me for organizing against them. It was such obvious retaliation that I almost laughed. They were handing us more evidence of their vindictiveness, documenting their own misconduct in official meeting materials. It was beautiful in its stupidity. I sent one email to the HOA's lawyer, copying his supervisor. I laid out every policy they'd violated, every instance of selective enforcement, every piece of evidence showing this was retaliation. I attached examples of 12 other backyard projects from the past 2 years that never appeared on any agenda. I mentioned the state complaint I was preparing and suggested that continuing down this path would be very expensive for everyone involved. I even quoted the section of state law that prohibits HOAs from retaliating against homeowners who participate in governance. They caved within 24 hours. The agenda item disappeared. I got a formal apology in writing, and the management company's last day ended even more quietly than expected. Their attorney called me personally to apologize and said he'd advised them from the beginning that their actions were legally questionable. This week, we're filling the resigned board member's position with another coalition candidate. The vote happened yesterday, and it wasn't even close. Next month, we're removing the last holdout and replacing him with someone who actually cares about the community. We already have the votes lined up to make it happen. The neighborhood that Karen and her allies controlled for nearly a decade is gone. We took it back. The Veterans Memorial is staying exactly where it is, by the way. One of our first official acts was passing a resolution protecting it permanently. We also formally apologized to him on behalf of the HOA for how he was treated. When I told him, he cried. He said he'd felt so alone fighting them and never thought anyone would stand up for him. We also rolled back the dues increase from $400 to $275 per month. Turns out we didn't need the extra money once we got competitive bids for services and cut out the inflated management fees. We've started publishing detailed monthly financial reports so everyone can see exactly where their money goes, something the old board never did in 8 years. People ask me if it was worth the time and stress every single minute. These bullies thought they were untouchable, and we proved them wrong. Their little kingdom collapsed, and now they're facing potential legal trouble for everything they did. Our attorney is reviewing whether we have grounds to pursue personal liability claims against Karen and the other board members for breach of fiduciary duty. Fight back, document everything, organize your neighbors, get legal advice early so you know your rights. When you do, the tyrants don't just lose, they crumble. And watching them realize they're not above the rules is worth every hour of work it took to get there. I work at a plant where the whole operation depends on someone keeping an eye on things at all times. My job is to make sure nothing breaks down or catches fire or does anything else that would shut us down or cost the company a fortune in repairs. The way it works is we have mandatory lunch periods based on our shift times. Simple enough, right? Except when you're the person who can't just walk away when an alarm starts screaming. For months, I kept missing my clock outs because something would always come up right when I was supposed to take my break. I'd be heating up my food and suddenly equipment would start acting up. I have to drop everything and deal with it. Then I'd forget to clock back in or out or whatever I was supposed to do. My old manager got tired of me calling him about it all the time. He told me about this survey thing in the system. I could fill it out saying I took my lunch, even if I didn't clock out for it. Payroll would adjust everything on their end. Problem solved. The survey had a few options on it. One said I voluntarily chose to skip my meal. Another said I took my lunch but got interrupted. There was even one for if I completely missed my lunch due to an emergency. The old manager made it clear this was exactly what the survey was designed for. People in my position who couldn't guarantee they'd have 30 uninterrupted minutes. So I started using it every single day. No more phone calls, no more confusion. I'd clock in for my shift, work my hours, fill out the survey at the end saying I took my lunch, and clock out. My paychecks were correct. Nobody complained. Life was good. Then we got a new manager. About a month after he started, he pulled me aside. He told me he'd been looking at my time cards and noticed I wasn't clocking out for lunches. I explained that I filled out the survey every day. He said the survey was only supposed to be used occasionally when I legitimately missed a clock out. I told him the old manager had instructed me to use it whenever I needed to. I pointed out that the wording said I voluntarily chose to skip my meal, and that's what I was doing. He insisted I needed to start clocking out for my 30-minute lunch break every day. He said it was company policy. I tried to explain that if I got interrupted during that lunch, I'd have to clock back in, deal with whatever the issue was, and then either clock out again to retake my whole lunch, or just use the survey anyway. He told me to make sure I didn't get interrupted. I tried explaining that I couldn't control when equipment decided to malfunction. He wasn't interested in hearing it. He ordered me to start clocking out, so I did exactly what he asked, just not the way he expected. We have a 2-hour window to take our 30-minute lunch. I started waiting until the very end of that window. Then I'd watch the equipment monitors real carefully. There's this one piece of machinery that likes to run hot. Not dangerous hot, just annoying hot. When it hits a certain temperature, a nuisance alarm goes off. Someone has to go silence it and maybe adjust a few things. Takes about 10 minutes total. I started clocking out for lunch right when I could see that equipment creeping up toward the alarm level. Like clockwork, 5 to 10 minutes into my lunch, the alarm would go off. Oops, Guess I have to clock back in. Company policy says if your lunch gets interrupted, you either have to retake the entire 30 minutes or you get paid for it. By the time I dealt with the alarm, there wasn't enough time left in my shift to take another full lunch. So I'd fill out the survey saying my lunch was interrupted, and I'd get paid for that half hour. I did this every single day for 2 straight weeks. The new manager noticed. I could tell he was annoyed, but he couldn't say anything because I was following his instructions to the letter. I was clocking out for lunch like he demanded. It wasn't my fault the equipment kept having issues. Then one day, someone else showed up to talk to me. My old manager who'd been promoted a few years back. He was now the boss of the new manager. He asked me why I'd stopped using the survey. I told him his replacement had instructed me that I had to clock out for lunches. I explained that the new manager said the survey was only for occasional use. The old manager rolled his eyes. He told me the survey existed specifically for operators who couldn't guarantee uninterrupted breaks. He said I should start using it again. I asked if he was sure because the new manager had been pretty insistent about the clocking out thing. He confirmed he was sure and said he'd talked to the new manager. I went back to using the survey. The new manager never said another word about my lunches. I saw him in the hallway a few times after that and he'd just nod and keep walking. No more lectures about company policy. But the real victory came a few weeks ago. We got brand new time clocks installed throughout the facility. Fancy touchscreen ones with all sorts of features. And guess what's embedded right into the clock out screen now? The survey. When I clock out at the end of my shift, a message pops up automatically. It's defaulted to saying I took my lunch at some point during my shift. All I have to do is tap OK. If I actually did miss my lunch due to some emergency, I can change it right there and get paid for the missed break. But for normal days, it's just one button. Clock out, tap OK, go home. I don't even have to go into a separate system anymore, so I still don't clock out for lunch. The new manager sees me do it every single day, and there's nothing he can say about it because the new system is set up exactly the way the old manager always intended it to work. I asked around and found out the old manager specifically requested that feature be included when they were designing the new time clock system. He must have been planning it before he even got promoted. The union rep told me a few other operators had similar issues with managers who didn't understand how our jobs actually work. Now it's standardized across the whole facility. No more arguments, no more confusion. Just one button at the end of the shift confirming we took our breaks. Last week I saw the new manager trying to explain the new time clocks to someone he just hired. He told her that at the end of her shift, she should just tap OK on the lunch confirmation screen. The new hire asked if she needed to clock out for lunch. He told her no and said to just use the confirmation button. I caught his eye when I walked past. He looked away real quick. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The new system says everything that needs to be said. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.